Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am Dimitris VOGGOLIS, the coordinator of International Hellenic Association, and in collaboration with the Organization for the Promotion of the Greek Language, we make an effort to create bridges of communication all over the world. To promote the Greek philosophy through Zoom, I would like to welcome you to the English courses for professors and teachers, with the hope that a good beginning is the half of the battle. I wish you a good trip in Greek philosophy. And now I give the floor to Professor Mr. John Xatzopoulos.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. Well, let me check my email and see, because we expect 3 more people to come, and I'll come right back. Dimitri, Eleni Foufas has a different email. She cannot get the message, the link in the mail you sent to her. I'm going to send you the email so that you can send the link to her, all right?
Okay.
Okay, let me do it, because we cannot make the laboratory without Eleni.
I make you host, co-host. I made you co-host.
Okay, Dimitri, I send you the email. Get the email of Foufas and call her. Give her the link, all right?
Okay.
You have to check your email. Okay, thanks very much, coordinator Dimitri.
Never mind. Just wait.
Okay. Well,
So,
I am. Do I have the floor and in the Dimitris? I am okay to start.
no, not yet. Not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. Wait for a moment. Oh. Did you get it?
What to get?
The link.
Me? You have to send to Eleni Foufas the link. I sent you the email of Eleni.
The email comes back.
It is Esparcadia. You use this email, Esparcadia? She changed the email. It's not the one that originally had. She changed it because she couldn't get the email there. Her name is Esparcadia at gmail.com.
Okay, let's see.
Let's start, Dimitris, and we will get Eleni.
Eleni is in the waiting room.
I don't know. Which email did you use? Spell it.
Try now. You may have taken it. What
Dimitris,
happened, John?
το έστειλες στην Ελένη το email που σου έστειλα.
Yes.
Πώς λέγεται, σε τι email το έστειλες?
Τώρα.
Okay, she's in the meeting room, Dimitri, so you may let her in. Okay, I did it.
Eleni.
Yeah, she is coming. All right, let's start then, all right? Are we ready?
Yes, you may start.
Okay, well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, in this Hellenic education course. I am Professor Xatzopoulos. I've been professor since 1980 at Fresno State for 9 years. And then I moved to the Department of Environmental Studies here in the University of the Aegean, Greece. And I got retired in 1915, but still I am Professor Emeritus, so I hold my office, my research and everything. Although I am a surveying engineer, geomatics, geographic information systems, and geospatial science and analysis, I like philosophy, and particularly education aspects of philosophy. And that's the reason I work for over 20 years to create this kind of material and offer this course, which I hope you find it interesting. So I want to introduce my assistant is General Dimitris VOGGOLIS, who is the coordinator of the course, and Eleni Foufas. Welcome, Eleni, in the panel. Okay. Who is responsible coordinator and responsible for the lab. Eleni, well, I'll let you introduce yourselves, starting from Eleni, and then the next of you.
Hello, can you hear me? first.
Yes, okay, welcome.
Okay,
Welcome, Ellen.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Xatzopoulos. Thank you to the coordinator, Mr. VOGGOLIS, and hello to the students who are with us today. Hopefully we'll have a larger audience soon next week. This is indeed a pleasure for me. I retired 2 years ago from the State University of New York system, where I taught for 39 years, 39 years in the English department, teaching film, teaching literature, teaching English as second language, whatever we had in the department, I did. My first love is, of course, world literature. I enjoy learning about cultures, customs from the international world through their literature. So I'm hoping that my contribution, which is a very small part of this course, because Dr. Xatzopoulos has created this incredible complexity of information, but my small part will be to look at the philosophical underpinnings through some works of literature. And I don't know if you have, Jerome, if I may call you Jerome, and Stella, I don't know if you have received the list yet, but I will be sending that list out today after the class. I may want to reorganize the selections that we look at depending on the interests of the group. So that's a little bit about me. I'm living in the southern part of New York State in the US, in the middle of nowhere, I guess you could say. And, but looking forward to the course itself, looking forward to the interaction, I should say.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Eleni. Jerome.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Oh, excuse me. Hello, everyone. This is the first words I've said today. Thank you, John. Appreciate your gesture of putting this course and so forth on. By way of background, I suppose I'm a philosopher, perhaps an amateur one. I run a discussion group, and I think that's how we became familiar with each other, John.
Okay.
I run on academia.edu. But apart from that, I also do some other work. I've written a number of books in philosophy and literature. I really don't have much to say, except that I'm very much interested in ancient philosophy, particularly Greek literature, and really most things ancient Greek, if I can put it that way. I spend a lot of time in Greece, and I love it very much. So anything that I can learn from others is very much appreciated. So thank you for, again, thanks for putting this group together, and I'm looking forward to what I might be learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Stella.
Yes. So I'm first generation American. Both of my parents came here in their early 20s. Even though they came here when they were young, they still imparted their Greek values, cultures onto us. We learned Greek as a first language. We went back to Greece as much as we could. My education is as a lawyer, and I worked for a few years as a lawyer, and then I focused on raising my children and always imparting Greek culture in them, even to this day. Do they speak fluent Greek? No, but they understand it more than they can speak it. Dancing is always a part of our life and our culture, especially Cretans. So we try to always, like I told today my son what I was doing, and he's like, that's great. He's like, let me know. He's like, he goes, you know, whatever it is that makes you feel better as a person is what you should be doing in your life. And that's our philosophy. And I studied some Greek tragedies in college, and I'm hoping to learn more. And again, thank you for putting this together.
Thank you, Stella. So let's start the course, okay? Let me start sharing the screen here. See the screen?
It's black right now. It says that you're sharing it, but it's not showing anything.
Not yet. Yeah.
There it goes. There it is.
Okay, that's all right, all right.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Well, this is the course outline. And today we are going to cover the first lecture, Introduction to Internal Balance with Plato's and Aristotle's model. And these two models are the ones we are going to work throughout the course. And the course is composed of the lectures and the laboratory. The lectures, we try to make it half an hour. The laboratory in 1 hour. I will do the lectures and Hellenic Foufas will do the laboratory. In the laboratory, we are going to work out one thing, the internal and external balance, which is I think the most difficult thing to do someone in practice. And but therefore, in each laboratory, we are going to have a different text. Today, we have the tragedy of Sophocles Antigone, for example. So today we are going to cover these topics: nature, laws and rules, Hellenic education, the virtuous person, natural law, social norms and rules, internal balance, about mathematics and analysis, about mathematics, proportions, direct and inverse, and external balance. Now, talking about nature, laws and rules, the laws are mandatory. If someone say, I'm going to jump into a cliff and will get right away the consequences. And the rules have tolerance limits and exceptions. And we are going to talk about rules. For instance, the planetary system, if we take each planet, we will see never goes over the same orbit. There is a mid space of orbits that goes through. And if it gets out of the bounds, the tolerance limits, with other words, then they collide with the sun or get lost in space. The same thing, tolerance limits we have in the stomach for the acids. They cannot be less than a limit or more than a limit. The same thing happens to the heartbeats. They are within limits, and exceptions are the athletes. For instance, at the moment, they perform the athletics. Okay, so we have in the rules, tolerance limits and exceptions. Also, the most important rule is the rule of balance, which contains all the rules in nature. These are the rules for the rule of balance. Contains the rules for the regular performance of the objects in nature. And also, sometimes we have stability. Instability, we'll talk about that and how it affects the peace. Hellenic education now has several important things. It is harmony with nature to follow the Hellenic education. And when the body is sick, needs medical care and attention. The same thing if the spirit is sick, according to the Greek Hellenic education. When the spirit is sick, needs education. Also, in education, the Hellenic education includes the aesthetics, the sense of the beautiful. Now, in education with regular school started about 2,500 years ago in Athens, Greece. And to attend the schools there, you need to know mathematics. So there was here in the entrance of such schools was the label, do not enter if you do not know geometry. And geometry would include mathematics and astronomy. So within Hellenic education, Hellenic education targets the virtuous person, arete, and areto anthropo. And I found two models leading to that direction, or put the basis for the virtuous person. The one is the Platonic model, which I call internal balance, where the logic must be sufficient to balance desire and anger. And the second model I found is the Aristotelian. Aristotle was the student of Plato, and I call it external balance, that the thoughts and actions must be neither incomplete or exaggerated, but must be within the mid-space of virtue. And this model, Aristotelian model, actually models the human error, because outside these virtue limits, we are talking about human error. And outside of these limits, we have bias, prejudice, deception, and all the evil things that happen outside these limits, except if we have exceptions like self-defense. Okay. I said those things here in the University of the Aegean. Some people in the human sciences, and the colleague answer me and say, I think you are confusing the natural laws, which against people interpret the implicit imprint in laws and rules, regularities, to understand the greatness of nature with social norms and rules. And actually, he was telling me that I cannot mix the natural laws or the harmony with nature with the social norms and rules. And my answer was that if I confuse the natural laws, then Aristotle also confuses them because he said the following: the goods and things politicians deal with differ, and misinformation so that to appear as legal, but not in harmony with nature, okay, in Nicomachean Ethics. Actually, I use these two books, Plato, the Republic, the book Plato's The Republic, and Aristotle, the Nicomachean Ethics. Now, let's talk about the internal balance. Internal balance means continuous effort in all of our life to have sufficient logic to balance desire and anger. And Plato gives this example. He represents the desire with the blind horse, the anger with the crazy horse, the coachman, the logic, and the coachman tries to drive these two horses on the way of virtue, okay? And if we take also, if we consider Aristotle's midway of virtue, it doesn't have to be exactly here, the logic to fit exactly to these two forces, because if we examine this example of Plato with the physics as balance of two forces, okay, we have the desire force, the anger force here, and the logic force that balances these two forces, then the logic doesn't have to balance exactly according to Aristotle, okay? But could be a little bit less or a little bit more, and that creates the midway of virtue, okay? And we may call this midway of virtue the acceptably correct balance, okay? What we said here. Actually, This is something that has to be taught in the schools, like anger management, because you can do this to create this balance. It needs to have anger management. They don't teach in the schools. The other is desire management. This is also not taught in the schools. And within the mid space of Aristotle to be the acceptably correct or the correct, we may call it. Now about mathematics. Mathematics is the science of structures and help to extend the human intellect, the human mind, and could analyze any complicated problem, no matter if it's philosophical or and any kind of construction problem, civil engineering or surveying engineering, okay, mechanical engineering. If it's a structure, mathematics help us to analyze such structures and establish relations between the elements of the structures, and also could help us to see those relations through graphs. Let's see how it works. We have in the analysis of the structure into parameters, components, or variables, relationships or equations between parameters. Usually the relationships are expressed with equations. And the graph to see visually the relationships. What the relationships do in mathematics is that in a structure, we may know some certain elements, but we don't know some others. With relationships, we can calculate the elements we don't know. And you will see here in philosophical structures, we are going to surprisingly see things that we could not imagine that exist. About, let's take an example, a very simple example, like someone goes to the grocery store to buy 3 kilos of apples for $2 per kilo. And this is a structure, we can analyze it. The parameters we said, or the elements of the structure is the apples, price per kilo, and weight. And if we do an abstraction to use brief symbols for those components, here we use AP for apples, price per kilo, PK, weight, and cost here. These are the parameters. And then we can go through the relations. That cost is equal price per kilo multiplied by the weight, 2 times 3, $6. If we want to use the parameters, cost is equal price per kilo, weight, or if we consider the price per kilo or constant, that doesn't change easily, but we want to buy different days, different weight, okay? So we can have this expression 2 times WT. This 2 here, a number, we call it constant. And this is a variable. This is also a variable. This, the weight is the so-called independent variable because we could give to the weight several values. And this is the dependent variable that depends on what value we give to the weight to calculate this one. Then we can make a graph with this relationship, this equation. In the one axis here, we put the weight, on the other, the cost, and we put a couple of values to the weight. Also, we can make more abstraction to this relationship here, call this X, and the weight Y. Or call this Y, excuse me, and the weight X. Okay, we give to the independent variable X several values, 0, 1, 3, we calculate the Y, and we plot these values, and we make this blue line you see here in the graph. So we have analysis, relationships, graph of the relationships to see how they optically how they look like. And this is mathematics. Now, another thing I like to analyze before we go to the philosophical structure to apply the mathematics there, okay, is to talk about proportions, direct and inverse proportions. Now, this equation we wrote before, 2 times CT, 2 times WT, then this is a direct proportion. Why? Because if we increase this independent variable, the dependent variable also increases. If we decrease the dependent variable, also the independent, if we decrease the independent variable, the dependent variable also decreases. And we give an example here, okay, we give WT 5, then this one becomes 10. On the other hand, in the inverse proportion, what we have the opposite. If this variable, for instance, time increases, which is in the denominator here, if the time increases, then velocity decreases, considering that the distance here is constant. Okay, let's give an example to see how it works here. For instance, we have to cover a distance 60 miles, you see here, and the velocity will be 60 divided by the time we need to cover this distance. Now, if the time is 1 hour, we have to speed 60 miles per hour. If we increase the time to 2 hours, then we cover the same distance with a speed of 30 miles per hour. You see, we increase the time, the velocity decreases. We increase the time to 5 hours, the velocity decreases. This is called inverse proportional, inverse proportions. Now let's try to apply now this math to the philosophical structure, all right, and see how it works. In the external balance, we said earlier, Aristotle's model, thoughts and actions are neither defect or excess, but they are within the mid-space of virtue. That's what we said. Okay, let's say that X is the human error and Y is the acceptable correct human error within limits. Okay, the midway of virtue, we call it correct or acceptably correct. I gave you an example with the horses to see what do we mean acceptably correct. Okay, so these two quantities coexist in any human action because human brain that directs such actions is based on neurons, and neurons are not absolutely correct. Okay, so always they have an inherent error, and therefore in any action, correct, acceptably correct action, X and Y coexist, they are together, but they are inverse proportional to each other. That means if we have an action which goes close to the absolute correct, then the error there goes to 0. We increase the Y, okay, we decrease the X. How we express mathematically such inverse proportional relation? Very simple with this equation here. Okay, X is equal 1 over Y. Now let's do the graph and see how it works. We take a straight line, you see here. In the middle, we put the 0. This straight line is the human error. In the middle, we put the 0. And then the human error, if it is defect below the limit, the virtue limit we said earlier, is error with a negative sign. So goes from here to minus infinity, you see here. And if the error is excess, then it goes from the virtue border here to the plus infinity. Okay, so within this space here is the mid space of virtue, and it is the acceptably correct. That's what we are going to call it. And the quantity that defines this limit is this quantity x, plus or minus x. Okay, 0 plus x, 0 minus x. This is the mid-space of Virchow. We call this limit xl, the left value of x, and this is the right value of x. These are the borders. How can we now mathematically define these two borders, where they are located? Let's go to this relationship here. X is equal 1 over y. At the boundary here, over here, x and y must have the same value. Okay? Because it's a boundary, it's common to both, to the error and to the acceptably correct, these 2 points. Okay, so we can put in this form here, x is equal to y. Then this relation here becomes x is equal to 1 over x, or x squared is equal to 1. And the x is the square root of the 1, which is plus or minus 1. And then we can put these two borders here, minus 1 and plus 1. And in this way, we use mathematics on a philosophical structure, you will see. And to tell you the truth, I would never expect that I will get these two values here with this in this way, but the mathematics drive me to get them. All right. Later on, you will see how we are going to use to improve this diagram here with the error that people do in various groups with various biases, etc. Okay, in the next lecture. But the lecture for today's lecture for me ends right now, and I am open for questions if you have any. Jerome. You have any question? Do you hear me? You have to open your microphone, Jerome.
Okay. Yes, I hear you, John. I understand.
Okay. Okay. Stella.
I don't have any questions. I just find it very fascinating how you could do it in mathematical version, because it's just, never thought of it that way.
Okay. Eleni?
My question would be, but I think you will probably address it later. How are the variables? How can you express all the variables involved in that line? How do they affect the formula?
Any problem, you can express it as many variables as you wish, but you choose only the variables you are interested to work with your problem. For instance, in a circle, you may have variables, the radius, the perimetry, the area, the chord, the piece of arc, the tangent, okay? But if you work with a circle, you need to calculate, for instance, the area, you need only the radius, okay? You choose whatever you want to formulate the specific problem you have. That's how you choose the variables. You have freedom here. The mathematics give you lots of freedom, actually. Okay. So, Eleni, you have the floor and go ahead with the laboratory.
I'm going to open my PowerPoint, and I'm not sure how I share it. Are you going to help me do that? Let me see.
Let me see.
Okay.
Dimitris, you are the one to give Eleni to share the screen.
He's muted.
I'm looking, I'm
Coordinator Dimitris will give you probably coordinator privileges to share the screen. We don't hear you, Eleni. You have to open your microphone.
Yeah, right now I don't have the capability to share my screen, so, okay.
Dimitri, open your microphone.
Let me see.
Yes, I made Helen co-host.
Okay, so Helen, get the icon on the bottom of the screen and the green one, and say share screen and press it.
Share screen, I have it. Very good. Okay, and let me find my file here, if I can. Advanced files. Here we go. All right, so advanced. I'm not seeing where my my files are. I didn't save them in Google Drive. So let me see. I saved them in my own computer.
Okay, you can go ahead and in the browser and find them.
No. Shares, okay, let me open my screen and then, okay, can you see my PowerPoint now? Probably not.
No.
No.
Helen,
Okay.
you should have whatever you want to tell us in the service. You would have it open to the surface.
It should be open on your desktop. Open it on your desktop, and then when you share
It is open on my desktop.
so when you press share your screen.
And then
Press
share.
the bottom share screen, the green bottom on the bottom of
Okay.
the
Let
screen.
me do this. Okay. Well, when I click share screen, it doesn't allow me to share my screen. There's no option. I have Dropbox, Microsoft OneDrive.
Okay, try you, Helen. And now I give the floor to Stella.
Okay. Sure, Stella, I'm listening.
Okay, so if you open the file that you want to open and it's on your desktop, you could see it. Okay, so that's that. So then if you go to where we are in the Zoom meeting on the bottom, there should be some like buttons that I don't know exactly which buttons they are to press, but once you press those buttons, it's going to bring you up to allow access to your desktop.
Are you saying that the file will allow me to do that?
No, your file should already be open on your desktop as if you're presenting.
It is open. It is open.
So where we are right now onto the Zoom meeting underneath, because now he made you a co-host, it's going to allow you to share your screen.
I see the share screen button. I see that.
And when you click on it, is it?
It has 4 options. It says select a window or an application that you want to share. I have Dropbox, Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive, Box, and Microsoft SharePoint.
It's not letting you access your desktop from there?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't
give you any other option? It doesn't give you any other option?
I'm advanced. PowerPoint is virtual background, portion of screen, computer audio, video, content from second camera. And basic, I got it. I found it. I think I found
Anyhow,
it.
Helen, sorry, excuse me,
There
Helen.
it is, there it is. She got it. She
Got
got
it.
it.
Thank
Yes.
you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, everybody. I
That's
wasn't
okay.
able, I'm
Yeah.
sorry,
Okay.
I wasn't able to see. All right, from beginning. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Very stressful.
It's
This is
okay, it's all
the
right.
first
No
time, and
problem.
I do appreciate it, Stella. Thank you.
No
Thank you
problem.
so
Okay.
much. Okay, so we're looking at, I suppose we're looking at a tragic figure of Antigone, and we're going to look at the points of conflict that her actions represent, as well as some of the other characters in the tragedy, both from Plato's internal point of view and Aristotle's external. Although it's very broad, very general, it's much more than that. But okay, so does she display virtue according to Plato and Aristotle? And according to what we know so far today, virtue is represented by that midpoint, that midpoint of control. I guess I can use the word control between that comes between the passions. All right, let's go ahead and you know, and I must tell you, everyone, that I wasn't sure about who the audience would be today. So I'm going to be skipping over some of this because I have the feeling that the audience here is aware of these issues. So at any point, I'm going to fast forward to the main points of our discussion today, because I think this information we already know, right? So I'm going to just continue on, and I'm going to basically to do a generalized overview. It's about a woman disobeying Creon within the play by following her own beliefs. And we know that her own beliefs are represented by unwritten laws. One of the themes is loyalty versus disobedience. Another theme, which I think we're more concerned with, is does she display virtue in choosing death or not, according to Plato's and Aristotle's views? So that would be something that we can discuss as we go through this. All right. Again, I'm going to go rather quickly here, but there are some interesting points to be made about Antigone as we go through it. Because Sophocles was not just presenting a fictionalized version of a family or characters, but he was also touching on reality of his own time. He also focuses on the conflicts between religious beliefs and the political status quo. And so here we go now to the non-fictional areas of Antigone. And this is all information which is readily available if anyone does any research on Sophocles and what he was doing with Antigone. The character Creon, for example, refers to a real dictator of the time, Pericles. Creon's character may have been a warning to Pericles and the Athenians about the dangers of dictatorship. Again, moving away from that balance, that internal balance or virtue. What are some of the key facts in Antigone? Well, she herself and claims, and later I'm assuming that everyone knows who Antigone is. We don't need to go back and review who she is as a character, as a tragic figure. She claims that unwritten rules, her beliefs, led to her brother's death. The conflict between government laws and unwritten laws were greatly debated in the 5th century BC, and of course, greatly debated even today, 2,500 years later. Sophocles believes that unwritten laws are more important than formal laws. He may have written Antigone, therefore, to show that the priorities of the Athenians were wrong, which is a very interesting kind of aspect of the ancient Greeks at the time, especially Sophocles, the philosophers. That there are maybe not so much Plato, but let's look at Sophocles for a moment. That unwritten laws, in other words, the laws not created and developed and written down by man, but laws that have come down through tradition, through so the understanding of divine laws, more important than the laws written by men. We don't need to go through this because I think our guests today are well aware, so you can do a quick read yourself. I don't need to discuss this, but it does have some bearing on the narrative of Antigone, because as a woman, Antigone feels that she has some right to burial traditions. She's a woman, and at that time, women were in charge of funerals and burials. Of course, traders were not entitled to be buried within Athens, and her brother is considered to be a traitor. So let's look at a little bit now. Let's go to Aristotle and see what he considers to be justice, and then try to adapt it to Antigone's dilemma. So the meaning of justice could either be one of fairness or lawfulness. And so this conclusion can be drawn because Aristotle states injustice as unfairness and lawlessness. Laws attempt to encourage people to be virtuous, so trying to reach that golden mean, trying to reach that virtue in the center, not be swayed by passions and by desires. So the just person who is lawful will be virtuous, according to Aristotle. But justice and virtue can be different things, correct? Justice focuses more on someone's relationship with others or society. The condition of people who are acting lawfully and fairly can be characterized as acting just in a universal way in Aristotle's philosophical approach. And we already see the tension in Antigone. Right from the start, she is not willing. She's not willing, not able, does not feel it is morally just to be virtuous as defined by Aristotle, or as defined by the society that she's living in, Creon society. So another way to put it, okay, we have Aristotle versus Plato, Sophocles, Antigone. Each of these have different views of justice and virtue. And a question I can ask you now is, with which of these views of a virtuous life does Antigone fit in the best? I'm not asking rhetorically, I'm asking if you would like to try to answer that question based on what you've read and what you've heard this morning from Dr. Xatzopoulos and his introduction. Would anybody have any comments about Antigone and how she fits into this spectrum of virtue.
Well, thank you, Helen. You may take off the share screen so that we can.
I haven't finished yet, Dr. Xatzopoulos. I'm just taking a small break here at this point, just to begin a conversation.
What I want to say, Eleni, is that, okay, everybody has different opinion about justice, about everything. We are not going
Of course.
from that, okay? It's all right to refer and to analyze, but the focus here is into the two models, okay? Internal and external balance. Okay, we have to work out in a specific, because if we try to go off the bounds of internal and external balance, then we are lost. Everybody, you know, has different opinion. We have to try to, I consider these two models as the basis to develop everything else.
Okay, we can continue and try to have a little bit more focus before we open the conversation. That's fine. I'm not against that at all.
No,
Okay.
what I mean is for the characters, they are referred to the tragedy. What we can do is we can see who disturbs the balance. Okay. For instance, we can take Creon to issue this law not to bear the Antigone's brother. Okay, this disturbs the balance, for example. And what are the consequences of this disturbance from there on? You have Antigone to also go out of bounds, okay? And you have all this tragedy to get from there on, from this original just one person that does this.
If I hear you correctly, if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is saying is that each of the characters in the tragedy displays some aspect of imbalance.
That's right. Or is affected from the imbalance of someone else.
And I agree. I agree.
That's what I want to exercise. And that I want to exercise also what is the influence of the anger or the influence of the desire in the disturbance of the balance. And what if that become actions? Because if we go to Aristotle's model, we are talking about actions. The Plato's model is just the thinking that to create anger or desire or no logic. Okay, but from there on we have actions, and then we go into the Aristotle and see that the actions they go off the mid-virtue limits. Is not virtue a point, it's a mid-space, okay?
May I continue?
Yes, now you may continue.
Do we have any, is there a time limit today? I don't want to go over my time.
The coordinator, Dimitri, is there any time limit?
2:30, it's.
No, we have time.
Good.
We have much time.
And I think going forward, I would really love to be able to hear our visitors, our classmates, and their points of view. So anytime, please interrupt as I'm going through this. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, as a matter.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you. Well, what about Stella now?
What about me? I'm sorry. About my opinion on this?
Yeah. So, yeah.
So I read Antigone, I mean, I read it a very, very long time ago. So me coming from a law background, I'm more virtue. See, I just feel like when there's conformity and people follow conformity, the virtue falls from conformity, because if we don't have the laws and the boundaries, then I feel we would live in an unlawful society. So there have to be boundaries. And do I think there's exceptions to virtues? Yes, I could see that there being exceptions to virtue, but and I guess this is from my legal background, is like, if you break the law, you break the law. There shouldn't be any kind of like, I don't know what the word to use is exceptions. There's minor exceptions, but in this case, I understand her passion, but at the same time, if someone breaks the law, I just think that the conformity needs to be there for that. The justice part of it is what I'm saying, to prevail over the virtue.
And I think that is a prevailing notion. I think for most people at the local level, at the international level, the world level, and it's a prevailing notion. And at the same time, we need to, do we need to consider whether a person's private or inner beliefs can sometimes be stronger or can be more virtuous than the laws that a society has created. I mean, we see that there are many examples of many societies in history where the laws were, absolutely horrible. I mean, they made no sense. They were senseless laws. And so individuals, human beings, had trouble in overcoming this lack of freedom to express themselves. So do you see any kind of tension between an individual, like, for example, an individual like Antigone struggling with the laws of society as represented by Creon?
So like, because it was a dictatorship, different story. I look at it as when there's a dictatorship, it's like, and there's certain laws that I agree that need to be changed, but as a society, we come together and, and it's sometimes difficult to, when there is a dictator in place to kind of, overthrow a dictator or things like that. But eventually I believe that societies balanced, like, I just think that there should be a standard of morals in society that should be abided for. Like, so unfortunately, there's different countries. We see it now, North Korea, versus something like the United States, or even in Greece, where like people's rights are more, I guess I want to say honored or heard, versus somewhere in North Korea, where if you don't have a picture of I always say his name incorrectly, in the house.
Civil society. We don't have a civil society where individuals have rights. Right.
And I understand the both sides, but I just feel that when you have a dictatorship, it's harder, but eventually it needs to change. So yes, I agree with you on that. There are times, but I guess I live in a society where voices are constantly heard that I don't see from a dictator point of view. You understand? So I guess I'm limited, is what I'm trying to say. Is what I
think your points are very, very well said and very morally acceptable. Obviously, you're talking about chaos when we don't have a sort of common framework of laws versus. And that would be one extreme. You're talking about chaos, and then the other extreme would be, for example, North Korea, where you have the law that is so restrictive that people are stifled and people cannot express themselves. So in the case of Antigone and the conflict between her private sense of morality and the leader Creon's sense of what is right and what is just for Thebes and for his city-state, is it then necessary and inevitable that Antigone must sacrifice herself for those principles, or are there any other factors or variables involved in her decision?
Right.
So we can think about that and see where it takes us. Go ahead. Yes,
But is
Stella.
suicide always an answer, though? Is suicide, and I hate to say this way, I understand people look at it as virtuous, but is it a way out for her versus her not dealing with what is happening? Is it her easy way out versus, her struggling? Like, listen, we always say that now after COVID, there's so many people who can't deal with functioning in society. And it's like, there's always a window open. I always believe that there's always a window open. So in Antigone, is she taking the easy way out so she doesn't have to deal with everything? Or are we looking at it as a virtuous action that she's taking upon? Like, I don't want to sound like a cold person or anything like that, but
we understand. This is about how we understand these important issues that came up in ancient Greece and Sophocles.
Right.
Just a small point here. Now, Antigone, yes, she does commit suicide, but she would have been sacrificed had she not. In other words, she, by doing what she does, she takes away the power of Creon. Creon, and if you remember, Creon did change his mind eventually. He changes his mind when the chorus, Tiresias, I'm sorry. Tiresias has a good discussion with him, and the chorus is there, and his son, who is Antigone's fiance. And eventually Creon changes his mind, but too late. So Antigone, you could say, jumps the gun and takes away the power of the state to take her life. But had she waited, she may have survived. So where is the virtue here?
Right.
And that's the debate, and that's the discussion. Let's maybe continue a little bit further into this discussion. Okay, so she has a higher sense of moral justice, and by following those morals, she disobeys the laws of society, creating the tragedy. We see that. Excuse me. So we see that his justice, we understand, might be considered unjust. People request fair trials and just laws. And I put the word just in quotation marks with a question mark. And that's for the class to discuss if they wish. Because laws, as we know, and of course, Stella, you being a legal expert, you know that not all laws are just at any certain point in time. Laws are created by human beings who are flawed, and therefore they are not always just. Would you agree with that, Stella? Or do you feel that since the society, the body politic, has created these laws, therefore we must obey them? And I know you don't agree with that. I'm just putting it to you.
No, I understand. Do we have, well, at the moment we have to agree them or else you go to jail, but you could always take up a cause. Like, like look what's going on with abortion in the United States. Things are getting overturned and things like that. And hopefully people will take a stance for the health of women who are put in situations. So yes, I think they're flawed because like in the state of Texas, it doesn't even provide for an exception to rape or incest. So for me, it's, so yeah.
Texas is like Antigone, is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Texas is choosing its virtue, but may lead to a far worse society than
Yes.
it is saying that it's believing in. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I
Well,
think John's trying.
May I have
somebody,
the floor
John, Jerome, Dimitri. Yes, John.
to say a few things? Again, the tragedy
Yes.
starts from the loss of internal balance of Pollinikis, who didn't give the kingdom to his brother. Okay, he did disturb his internal balance because his desire was too large. He didn't give the leadership to his brother. That's where the tragedy starts. And then they kill each other. Okay, that's a consequence of the internal balance of the desire. Okay, that was strong. He wasn't logic to think of the consequences. And we have the consequences, they kill each other. And then Creon comes in power. Creon also is not a balanced man. He wants to show again the desire to hold his position. Okay, and that is strong, and nobody will break the law, etc. And that's how he decides not to bear the brother of Antigone. Okay, and that creates consequences. This disturbance of this balance again goes into the actions out of bounds, and the action not to bear the brother or his nephew is out of bounds, his action. Okay, again, disturbance, the other balance. And I want to say that what the law does and the justice, the goddess of justice, keeps a balance. Okay, and see who disturbs the balance is the guilty. All right, and in that spirit, I think we need to examine the characters in this tragedy to see who disturbs the balance and how and what are the consequences from there on. Jerome, I want to hear you on that.
Yeah, well, John, I've got a sort of an issue here with the two concepts of both virtue and justice. I really don't think they mingle very well, and I think that a lot of what's been said today or tonight is somewhat counterproductive, because when you start to confound one notion, one concept with another, you run into all of these ethical issues. I think really the story speaks for itself. Each party in that story was in some way reprehensible for their behavior. And I think that ultimately there were four. Tiresias's suggestion that two extras would be slain that day. Well, let's look at it. We still don't know what the outcome of Creon was. And there were also other issues with Creon's wife and of course, Creon's son. So, you know, the notion of justice really has nothing to do, in my view, with this story. It's really one, okay, if you talk about virtue, I think the virtue could be looked at from many different ways, but the discussion has no end, because it just becomes, you know, reduced into different opinions. So the notion of virtue, I think, is something very distinct from justice in itself. And justice really is something that can only be looked at after the fact.
May I respond?
We
Jerome?
go through.
Jerome? I tend to agree with you regarding the idea that that the characters in Antigone display any kind of justice for anyone. I do. I think that virtue and justice can be mutually exclusive in life. I think we see that. I see that they are mutually exclusive in Antigone. I mean, where there seems to be kind of a spiral of tragedy going on with many people and many people's action, the characters in Antigone, until we get to a place where we have no end really in tragedy. It just seems it's the end of the tragic story of the house of Oedipus. We don't even know how it started. We do know, I mean, obviously in the tragedies that are written, we know how the initial amartia, the initial sin has started, but there are so many unknowns and so many factors involved and variables that it's hard to get to the notion of justice. I agree with you on that. So anybody else want to chime in?
Well, may I go through? Hello, John.
Yes.
May I go through?
Hellenic.
I want to analyze two characters. Antigone is a tragic figure in Greek mythology. At the beginning of the myth of the Sphinx, with its unsolved riddle from Laios, what is that walks in the morning and at 4, in the afternoon at 2, and in the evening at 3? And whoever found it would become the king of Thebes. Oedipus found it, and taking the throne, he married the widow of King Creon, Iocaste. When was who was his mother, without knowing it, and takes out his eyes. Here, the exaggeration of the mediocrity of virtue with the tragic result of blindness worked. Assuming the throne, Creon demanded that everyone obey and respect him. Antigone was against his orders. This fact infuriated him, and what followed was catastrophic for his family to lose his children. And when he ordered the burial of Eteocles, but probably the burial of the corpse of Polynices, because it did not satisfy his wish. When the anger was on the side of his people, and Antigone, which did not hesitate to do what was right and sacred, to bury her brother without the help of either Ismene's sister. Absolute inner balance of virtue with just exaggeration. Anger when it concerns the whole one, when it is imposed and it is not bad at all, because the sentence is correct and logical. Or when there is an immediate danger, it reacts on the basis of anger without thought. The above example is given by Metaxas in the War of 1940, where we have the exception due to self-defense for the salvation of the homeland. Aristotelian external balance of transcendence of virtue in defense of the homeland. In this tragedy, Sophocles mentions money as a sign of corruption of society and its consciences. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitris. Again, I want to tell everything that here in this class, we are not talking about the law that runs today, influenced by various biased powers, you know, around the globe. We are talking about now to make a restart of education and put some basis how to build everything, the human sciences, the law, and everything. Human societies, the way they function today, it is a mess, has to change. This is what I try to do with this class. And this is what I try to put this basis, you know, foundation basis to build up everything. And also for justice, we have to consider what Aristotle says for justice is the includes all the virtues. It's the top virtue that includes all the virtues. Out of the midway of virtue is the evil. We have to consider that, and the laws, the legislation, and everything they have to build up in such a way so not to legalize the evil. Okay. If we want to survive as a human society, as human beings, we have to go that way. We have to understand what is the ideal, how to function the ideal society, and how in the mess we are today. Okay, and in that respect, we have to judge what happens in the real society, like the tragedy of Sophocles is the real society. Okay, and we have to see what goes wrong there. Okay, where the wrong starts. And I think it starts with these two brothers, HELLENIC and Theocles, that one gets the power and doesn't want to go off. He has to go off the next year, all right? Or Creon. Creon also acts in the way he acts, okay? And we have to judge on this basis how we can build the education system over these two bases to know what is wrong, what is bad, what is wrong, the midway of virtue and all these things. In the course, you will see, I'll get also with mathematics how the real society functions, all right? We'll get that with mathematics, but we need to go gradually there. But we start with the ideal society, okay? And the ideal society, as the nature rules are, has limits and exceptions. And those are there in order to have diversity and evolution. Okay, that's where is the tolerance, limits, and the exceptions. That's how they work in nature. And but
limits
anyway,
and okay. I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
So that's what
Okay.
I want to hear. You know, for each individual person in this tragedy, what disturbs the balance, the internal and the external balance, and what are the consequences? Okay, Helen, you have the floor.
I just wanted to say that if we take what you're saying, then every character is disturbing the balance. Every action of every character in this tragedy disturbs the balance, whether by not doing something, by not taking action, or by taking action. And so that, in my opinion, that's where we have the, this is where the complexity of the situation comes in. How do we decide? What is it that decides what is reasonable and what is not reasonable? I suggest that that Antigone's action is reasonable. From her point of view, it's a very reasonable action to take. Other people would say that Creon is acting reasonably by upholding the law, but even Sophocles sees that that is probably not the right way, the right thing to do, as he changes his mind later on. So what I'm trying to say is that it's very difficult to decide what actions are reasonable. How do we define reasonable action in a virtuous society?
Yeah, we are going to talk about that later on, because the nature of virtue, we say later on that we get them through the democratic process. But until we get there, at least let's start with who disturbs the balance, internal and external balance, and what are the consequences. And I say again that these two brothers, I think, who was on power? I think HELLENIC was off the power, all right? And he tried to get his right back. But the disturbance was disturbed by his brother. And Creon had to take consideration of that. So
you're asking us to look at the two brothers.
That's where the problem starts. The tragedy starts from the two brothers. They have to share the power, and one of the brothers say, "No, I am not going to share the power next year. I'm not going to give up the power."
But I understand that the local, the narrow focus of the conflict is Eteocles and Polynices. I understand that, and correct anybody else, please correct me and correct us, or if you have a different opinion, please jump in. I do understand that there is a local issue here, but in opposition to what Aristotle might believe, I see the problem as going back further. I think the conflict between the two brothers arises from the past. And I know what you're saying. You're saying that the individuals we should look at the individuals making those decisions. Is that correct?
That's right.
Xatzopoulos? Yeah.
Eteocles has a huge desire. He doesn't give up the power. He has to give to his brother. So because his desire is too much, he disturbs the balance. So HELLENIC goes to Argos to bring soldiers to attack and get his right back. So that's the consequences. You have a war because of the desire of Eteocles to stay in power. And then you have these two brothers fighting and kill each other. And then the uncle comes in power. And the uncle doesn't, he knows that the justice is to, HELLENIC, though he brought army to fight his city, he did something wrong, but he was right, because he was demanding his rights to be the governor of the city. Okay?
So your theory, your approach to the just and virtuous society rests with actions of the individual. Is that correct?
That's right. And someone disturbs the balance, and there are consequences. Like Eteocles disturbed the balance with his desire to be in power, and the consequences is the war. Then they kill each other. That's the consequence. Very bad things happen. Then comes Creon and he doesn't understand. He doesn't give the right to Polynikis, and he says he's a traitor, but he wasn't a traitor. He was trying to get his rights. Okay, so in this with this thinking, Creon also is out of balance with considering Polynikis as a traitor. And because of that, you have Antigone there who tries to bring things in balance. Okay, and but she doesn't have the power, and the power is against her, and you have the tragedy from there on.
Okay, well,
This is a
Okay.
very
somebody, Jerome?
You want something to say, Mr. Geronim?
yes, I was just going to say this is in ancient literature, this is a strong theme, the family and the chain reaction of wrong thinking or mistakes. And essentially all of these crimes of passion are based on emotional responses out of the range that John's talking about. But I think the real issue here is that it comes back to the individual. If the individual makes the correct choice, then that's all that matters. And society is really based on that notion of its members behaving in the right way. And, that's what laws are about, essentially giving examples or parameters of acceptable behavior. And in all the cases of all the characters in Antigone, they have all behaved poorly from a moral point of view, from their own point of view. And that is why these tragic family circumstances are handed down the line. That's why we have things and sayings like, it's in the blood, or it's in their DNA. So it's the thoughts and behaviors of our past or our ancestors that are really are being distilled in society even at the moment. And another good example of this is, of course, the Atreides in Homer's works, being the Odyssey and the Iliad, where the catastrophe is directly related, I should say, to the crimes of that family. So that's just my little piece for that, but I think it comes back to the individual to behave appropriately rather than ask society to produce laws that everyone can behave by.
Jerome, may I comment on what you've just said? It seems as if you're presenting a dichotomy between individual behavior and collectivist behavior. And what you seem to be indicating is that it's all about what the actions of the individual, and not what the society might be saying. But at the same time, you're saying that the individual should respect and obey what society is saying. In other words, the collective. Can you just elaborate a little bit more for me? Maybe I'm misunderstanding you.
Well, I'm not saying that the individual should follow what society requires. I'm saying the individual should act on one's own, conscience, if that's not the right word. But society really comes out of people behaving in a conscious way, in a relevant way to what is their perceived, desire, or sorry, their perceived way of behaving. So what they think is right, not so much just. So the society itself is really just a group or the reflection of an individual's behavior. That's eventually what happens with society. It develops in that way. And where you have strong characters like Antigone that are making decisions in a social environment, the decision could be looked at as being wrong in hindsight. But the relevance of I think the Theban plays is simply that one must act on what they believe themselves to be the correct way of doing things. But as one sees, this might have disastrous results as well. So the ultimate responsibility for society is in the individual, not in the society or the government of those individuals.
So the individual is responsible for adapting, obeying the laws of the society. And when the individual...
the individual is responsible for behaving in a way that it feels its conscience is righted. And whatever the consequences of that are, is what leads to the next level of either tragedy.
Thank you.
So I think you can remove social pressure. One must behave in a way that is moral.
Would you say then that Antigone is that type of character, therefore?
Yes, I think so. But the issue for Antigone is that she relies on her beliefs to justify her outcome. Her beliefs were that she had the right to bury her brother. She thought that right extended from something that was deeper than, a social restrictions. She believed that it was from God that she had the right to bury her brother. And so where people are, limited in their outlook, they're also limited in the ways that they can behave. So the notion of God in that sense created her behavior.
Okay, thank you very much.
What God thought was appropriate and overriding the social restrictions and laws.
Yeah, this is exactly the case of education, that to help people exactly know those balances, internal and external balance. And I think the human conscious, as you said, Jerome, is the one that help us to understand what is internal and external balance. Our conscious is the one. And almost all the people, they have this sense. It's a very small percentage, which I am going to analyze later on what's going on with the total population. Okay, but most of the people, they have this conscious of balance, internal and external balance. And if they go off the bounds, they know, they understand it. But it's good, these things, to get to the school for one reason, because there are groups of people, they have certain biases that they are implanted to them through the social system, usually through the social environment. And this creates the collisions and the wars and the mess we have today, because we have to understand that as humans, we can spend our energy for so many wonderful things. And we spend, with these conflicts and the wars against each other. Okay, but to get rid of this crap, we have to put on the education this basis and help through this basis to go into the legislature and get the organized society not to be affected by these biased groups, but by the free will and conscience of the people. And this is the purpose of this class.
Well, John, I think that is the real issue with society, is that people have been dumbed down to a point that they really don't have the opportunity to make, authentic decisions based on what is right. And I think the issue really is at an education level, and the absence of critical thinking as a discipline is what has led us to that point. So in the last 50 years in education in the West, critical thinking has been removed from the curriculum of generally high schools and even tertiary education.
Public education.
Yeah. So, people don't have the opportunity of actually weighing up what is right and wrong. And as you say, they are led by belief systems that are prearranged so that people can have a general view of things, that people can become compliant. The notion of critical thinking, even in education, even in the upper echelons of education, just doesn't exist anymore. The papers that are churned out by professors, by undergraduates, by anyone in the business, are in the main fundamentally flawed. We just don't have, there's not much point discussing the difference between Plato and Aristotle if one doesn't have
mediocrity. There is perpetuation of mediocrity. There seems to be
right.
built-in.
The modern mind has been, shaped to be compliant rather than to think. People don't think; they conform.
Therefore,
I'm generalizing.
Let us be the ones to try to do things right.
Yes.
What I think about this course, no matter if we are 2 or 3 people.
Well, I can jump in.
Okay, we have approximately 2 hours, and now I would like to ask Miss Stella. I heard that she has children. Do you?
Yes, 2 children.
Stella, do you have children?
Yes, I have 2 children, a daughter and a son.
How old are they?
My daughter is 22 and my son is 18.
Okay. We have schools all over the world and in America too. So we teach for free to everybody who likes to learn Greek language. If they want, you may send their emails and have the first.
I could do that, no problem.
Okay.
That's for my daughter.
If they want to join our schools, send their emails.
I will do that for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Xatzopoulos, you have the last word for tonight because we have 2 hours.
Well, I was expecting 3 more people to join the class, especially the one from Seattle. I was communicating earlier and he said he will be all right, but he didn't come. Okay, my word is that I know all of this Jerome said that happened, but as a human being, I believe we have unlimited power. Each one individual of us, unlimited power. And we can use that power to try to work in a direction that things they will straight up and get off the hands of the evil, I would say, okay? Because evil are the ones they create the mess we have today. And no matter how little or how few we are, if we put things in the right, say, direction, the right basis, and I found these two models to be the right basis, the internal and external balance. That's where everything, all the human behavior depends on that. If we try to understand these two bases and do the exercises in the lab, but along these two bases to find, you know, the root of the consequences. Okay, then we have hope as a society. Even one person, even 2, 3, 4, 5, how many we are, we can start that and try to exercise it right here. And
can I just say something with what you're saying with regard to that, and with John? We're sitting here and we know what morals are, but I am noticing the way John's just saying that critical thinking is deteriorating. I think people's morals and values are also deteriorating in general. Like I'm seeing the youth around me, and you know, I try to raise my kids a different way, and my kids are a minority in the world of what is going on today. So it's like, how do you impart morals onto the youth? Like we are, you know, I don't know if they want those morals to be imparted. You know what I'm trying to, you know, that's where I have a conflict sometimes, because it's like critical thinking stops, then the morals, people aren't teaching their kids morals anymore, values, or just, I mean, I don't want to say boundaries, but it's right and wrong. It's, you know, it's what's right and what's wrong, you know, like just raising kids in a healthy environment so that they can understand when they go out in the world, what's right and what's wrong.
Stella,
Can I say something? What are you wearing around your neck, Stella?
I'm wearing a cross.
yeah,
I think that's a good start.
Yeah, but my daughter doesn't believe in God now. So my daughter doesn't believe in God, but I have imparted morals on her.
But
Like
it does, yeah.
Yeah, because she's gone into the world, and unfortunately, like what I've imparted in her, she's going out and she's finding her way. But at the same time, I'm still in her head, and her father's still in her head. So she's
That's
on
where
the,
you should be. That's where you should be, because I can look at myself and people that I know when we were 18 and 19, we were also like your daughter. And it's a continuing, and our mothers were in our heads. So
but
stay in your head.
I could tell you though, in other seeing what's the children that are around, moving my kids into school and things like that, children, yeah, you know, so.
Stella, I had the same problem. I raised 3 kids, okay, and in their age, like your kids, they were behaving the same way, and they had the same problems, and they hate me as a parent. I was telling things like that, but after they pass being 30 years old or so, then they started thinking of what I was telling them, and they were coming to me. But of course, this start is not, you know, to change everything right
I know.
away.
I know.
What I try to do with this class is to get the material recorded and get it to the YouTube, so to be available and try to work on this basis, okay, to at least people even to have in their disposal their option to look at it and see actually what is wrong, what is right, and how to work on that. Okay, that will affect the legislation, the society organization of the society, and leave us, you know, to the misery behind and start looking for other things. We have the space, we have the universe, we have other things, you know, to think about. Okay. Well,
Okay.
this is what
Okay, we have no more time.
Okay.
We shall meet next Saturday at the same time. So
Okay.
I thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, Miss Helen.
Real quick, I'm sending everybody the reading for next week this afternoon in 1 hour. Everybody will
Okay.
have it in their email.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you
Thank
very much. Good night
Thank
for
you.
everybody.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Bye.